My personal opinion, in this particular instance, it's all about money, because you have to pay to have your animal sacrificed, and you have to pay to have your weapon blessed. It's not like anybody can go into the arena and hack an animal, or let's say sacrifice an animal.
So the minute someone has to pay to have something blessed, we already have this question mark.
Yes. You know, I don't want to say that Garimai doesn't exist. That's up to people in Hinduism, what they believe, and I respect that. But I have to question the fact that if you serve a god or a goddess who advocates violence to gain favor, is that really the kind of God that you want to worship? And you don't. And this doesn't just pertain to the Garimai instance. This pertains to all our religions, you know, whether it's Islam, whether it is Judaism, whether it's Christianity. You know, I know Christians don't sacrifice animals for God, but, you know, there's lamb and Easter, and there's turkey and Christmas. So there is a connotation, not necessarily a religious connotation, it's more traditional or cultural. But again, you know, the sacrificial
lamb. It boils down to the same thing.
Sorry?
It boils down to the same thing.
It boils down to the same thing. You know, the lamb at Easter, sacrifice the lamb, etc., etc. And, you know, now with you guys, the Muslim community, there's a lot of sacrifice going on for religious purposes as well, to appease Allah or the Prophet, or call it whatever you want. But again, you know, I would question any God or anyone I have faith and believe in who wants me to advocate violence and harm or take a life against, you know, someone else's life. I would definitely question that. And I'm not saying what people are doing are wrong, but if you look at Islam, for instance, eating meat is not a must. You know, the Quran doesn't say you have to eat meat to be a good Muslim. It's a choice. Also, the sacrifice. Sacrifice isn't a must. You don't have to sacrifice. You know, Allah and the prophets and everyone else will be more than happy with a sacrifice of another kind, because it's about the sentiment. It's not about the killing or the offering. It's about the sentiment. It's about praising and worshipping your Godhead. You know, and if you came with a basket of fruit and you'd offer a basket of fruit, I'm pretty damn sure that Allah or Jesus or whoever will be happy with that, because it's a sentiment that counts. So again, you know, in Islam, simply because you choose not to sacrifice an animal for religious purposes doesn't make you a bad Muslim, because the Quran doesn't say you have to do that to be a good Muslim. You have to eat animals to be a good Muslim. In fact, the Quran is actually quite the opposite. I find that the Quran is very, very vocal in advocating compassion, not towards only towards animals, but towards humans as well.
To all of creation.
It's to all of creation. You know, and how can you say something is compassionate and kind and merciful when you take a life? That is the complete opposite.
I want to, now that you brought up the Islamic aspect of it, I want to touch on a particular matter around that. And look, your viewpoints are there, my viewpoints are there, and that's why we are having this discussion. But be that as it may, the one aspect that I'm concerned about is that when it comes to the Islamic side, and look, viewers, you can take this as you wish. It's neither here nor there for me, because this is my experience, and my experience is something that is not determined by someone else's viewpoints. It's determined by that which I have experienced, and that's why I have those viewpoints. But I've been through to many sacrifices around the time of Eid, for example. The basic regulations that were laid down to ensure that, now I know you as an activist might be on the view that these sacrifices don't need to be done at all, but that's a theological debate. So that's not the area I would want to touch on right now. I want to touch on the aspect that if you are going to do it, for example, there was basic protocol put in place for that to ensure that there's no abuse at the same time. Now we're getting past a certain point where people are not observing the basic tenets. For example, what do you define as halal? Halal was not only at the time of slaughter and how the animal bled out, and that determined halal. What determined halal was the entire process before slaughter also, and then that comes down to the basic sciences of neurochemical imbalances. For example, urine. You saying that in Yulin, animals need to be abused so that certain neurochemicals can flow so that the meat tastes a certain way. That's not only obnoxious, but it's poisonous in my view at the same time. So all of that was supposed to be averted. So I think while you brought up Islam, I want to appeal to people that if you are going to be doing the slaughter, then understand that you need the basics put in place that was prescribed. Animals should not be seeing other animals, not be smelling, seeing knives. There are animals that dart off, that are caught afterwards and then slaughtered. I mean, all these things are not in line with the regulations put down by Islam. The fact that we know that and it's been taught a certain way, we also need to look at certain aspects that you have brought up already. And that is, if you are doing things, are you doing it simply because you need to do them, or you are doing them to show family, or you're spending money because you want everyone else to see what you're doing? There are many other questions that goes on around all of that. But looking further at religion in a broad spectrum, Nikki, if I can just take us to that section of the discussion, the dichotomy for me is what you have brought up, and that is that if things are done in the name of religion, then why is no compassion being displayed? Because if I look at all the religions, and we maybe disagree about the basic tenets of certain religions, and maybe theological discussions of who arrived where and who said what and which gospel said what, we can go on about all of that, that's fine. But the one thing that we cannot ignore is that there is no religion that stands for abuse and that instructs abuse and that says do not be compassionate, merciful. There's no religion that goes against that. So the odd thing is that we never unite on those fronts.
Yeah, yeah.
But when it comes to this, we can unite on those fronts. So what religion advocates that?
I think, the basic principle of every single religion is compassion, mercy, kindness, to be as close to the image of God or Jesus or Allah as possible. And all our figureheads are, even though they say it's a vengeful God or, God has some kind of violence, the basic principle is looking after creation, being kind, merciful, and compassionate. I'm going to come back to the Quran. There's a section in the Quran where a guy wanted to sacrifice a sheep to Allah. And then he went to Allah's prophet and he said, listen, I'm so sorry, but I just couldn't do this. I took mercy on the beast. And the prophet said to the man, well, because you had mercy on this animal, Allah will have mercy on you twice. And that for me says it all. And whether it is, the Quran or the Bible or the Torah, it is all about compassion, but it's just so convenient to use religion or culture or tradition, whatever excuse you have, to abuse an animal. If we are truly honest and sincere in our faith, we should be practicing compassion to everybody, not selectively, not just to my neighbor or to my dog. Compassion doesn't discriminate. Compassion is just that, compassion. It doesn't say, it's conditional only to humans or only to animals. And I'm pretty sure that if one day we get to meet our maker or makers, that they would say, I gave you creation to look after. I gave you the free will to make the choice to be compassionate and kind and merciful. What would you say? Would you say I exercised that? Because to me, the ultimate abuse, the ultimate betrayal of compassion is the death of another living being. So whether we, slit an animal's throat compassionately, or we think we're doing it humanely, the only humane death that exists is when you put another living being out of his or her misery. Taking a healthy animal and taking their life is the ultimate form of abuse.
On that particular matter, I don't think that they meet the conditions, the pre-halal aspect, which I call pre-halal.
So then how can that be acceptable in any religious community?
Because you know what's going to happen there, and whether people know this or not, any businessman, and that's why I brought this issue up, any businessman, that cow that's laying half dead, trust me, behind the scene they're going to slaughter that, package that, because they're going to lose out $5,000 or whatever that thing might cost. I don't even know the cost. But the point is, that's all business decisions. And business and religion has never mixed well. The one has always treated the other one in favor of business. It's never mixed well. But you made me think about something, Nikki, and that was, we recently lost one of our cats after 15 years. I think I told you about that about 3 weeks ago. And my mom was very cut up about all of that. But my mom always says this one thing, and she says that we must recite something when we feed the cat the food, which we normally recite as Muslims before we eat. And in English, it's in the name of the Almighty, the most merciful and the most beneficent. So when we say that, we give the cat her food and whatever she's going to eat. And my mom says that we should be saying that because one day, when we all have departed and the time of judgment has come, they will be called up to give testimony as to how we treated them. And therefore, they will stand as testimony against us in terms of how we've treated them. And growing up, I've always taken sort of solace in that, because I used to be very cut up when our cats die, especially we've got one now for 20 years already. And so I think about this day coming. But when my mom used to say that, I always used to think to myself that I will at some point see them, and hopefully they'll give us a good report as to what.
Well, I would like to know what the cow in your stomach is going to say at that report.
It's accountability.
Exactly.
It comes down to accountability, and I believe that our religious constructs are built on aspects of accountability. So whether that is Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, we're accountable to something. So I think we need to question, how is that accounting going? Where are we with that accounting right now? Is the balance sheet looking bad or good? It's about that. And I think that that's the internal assessment that we all need to start making. And if we have not made that assessment, then let's start making that assessment now. You know, just in the break or between our episodes, we chatted about something, and that is, I don't think that the two of us sitting here getting hot-headed can maybe change everything in the world. The one thing that we perhaps want to do with these shows is to start and ignite that flame of cognitive change, just to start telling our viewers, can you start thinking different about what you're doing? Can you be more conscientized about what you're doing? That's all I want to leave the show with. It's up to a viewer to decide to change for the better. But what I take out of this is your journey. I like the fact that you said in a previous episode that you've changed as a human being. And isn't it about that change?
It is about that change, but for me, it's a bigger picture. How might the changes that I make in my life affect those around me? And I'm not just talking about humans, I'm talking about animals as well. You know, as I said, look, if you look at the Christian Bible, in Genesis, it says, or in the Ten Commandments says, thou shalt not kill. It didn't say thou shalt not kill animals. It didn't say thou shalt not kill humans. It says thou shalt not kill. Yet we are so selective in what we take out of our religious text to fit and suit our own needs, as opposed to, again, looking at what our religious texts give us and applying that to change the world. I mean, the Quran is big on, you know, changing the world and keeping compassion and the betterment of mankind and the religion. So all these things that we are discussing, as I said in the beginning, is not an attack on religion, but these kinds of discussions are so needed because it helps us become better religious people. You know, I don't think there is any fault in questioning your religion. You know, religion shouldn't just be blind faith. Religion should be questioning the path that you are traveling with your figurehead and making sure that at the end of your life, the testimony that you get at the pearly gates or heaven or whatever the afterlife brings gives you a positive review and saying, you know what, once just before Eid, or I decided to offer up a basket of beautiful fresh red apples instead of slitting the throat of an animal in whichever way our religion describes, and taking the life and seeing the pain and the panic in that animal's eyes, knowing that it's about to die. Is that the kind of God that I want to worship? Is that the kind of action that will give me a positive review at the end of the day, at the end of my life? And those are the changes that we need to make by questioning our religion, by questioning our text, by questioning our religious teachers. We actually have an obligation to do so, because it helps us become better religious people. And at the end of the day, pleasing our figurehead and getting a positive review.
Nikki, thank you. We've reached the end of the episode. This episode went fairly fast. Nikki Botha, you call yourself a social activist.
Civil society
activist. And I'm going to tell you why in the next episode. But Nikki discusses animal abuse and issues around animal abuse and how we can avert that in the way that we think and the way that we do things. Now, the views that Nikki expressed might not be that of the network or the show or myself or anyone, but what I find interesting is that we discuss the matters from different viewpoints. Nikki's viewpoints are based on the idea that she comes face to face with abusers. You've seen the previous Yulin episodes and what's been going on there, and I think it's important for us and myself and you as a viewer to sit back and think at times about the way that we treat animals and how that impacts our very own behavior and how that impacts the behavior of our children. Sometimes we run off to all kinds of psychologists and psychiatrists to look at how we can alter behavior. Perhaps that behavior is innate in the early stages of life. Cardinal traits, difficult to change because we ourselves don't want to make that change. Goodbye.